That was the notification blinking on my screen at 11:47 p.m., glowing in the dark like a tiny, cruel spotlight aimed directly at my face. For a moment I thought my old eyes were misreading it. I even blinked twice, leaned forward and tilted the phone toward the lamp beside my bed. But the numbers didn't change. They sat there, still and smug, almost daring me to react. When your own family turns your kindness into their opportunity, the truth doesn't just hurt, it changes you. If you've ever felt used or pushed aside, stay with me. This is one story you shouldn't miss. I didn't gasp or cry out or clutch my chest the way my daughter always assumes a woman my age will do. Instead, I just exhaled, a long, steady breath I didn't even realize I'd been holding all day. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the occasional tick from the old wall clock in the hallway. I stared at the transaction for a full 10 seconds before gently pressing my thumb to unlock my phone. There it was. 4 business class tickets. Booked while I was asleep. Booked using my card. My first reaction wasn't shock. It was a strange, familiar heaviness. The same feeling I used to get when the kids were little and I'd find the cookie jar empty but they'd tell me they hadn't touched it. Only now the cookie jar was nearly $12,000 and the children were all in their 40s. The bedroom felt colder suddenly. Not a winter chill, but the kind of cold that settles in your bones when you finally admit something you've ignored for too long. I threw back the blanket slowly, carefully placing my feet on the wooden floor so it wouldn't creak. At my age, you learn to move quietly not because you want to hide but because you're tired of the constant noise of life. I walked to the dresser, grabbed my reading glasses and perched them on my nose. Maybe, just maybe, I was still mistaken. Oh, there it was again. $11,940. American Airlines. Purchase approved at 11:32 p.m. While I was in bed, already drifting off to sleep, my hand began to tremble, but not because I was overwhelmed. It trembled because I recognized the pattern. The small, careless entitlement. The assumption that I would simply handle it, absorb it, forgive it, because I always had. And that's when Mom's voice from earlier echoed in my head like a fresh wound. Flights are $860 each. If you can't afford it, stay behind. Funny how people talk about affordability when they plan to use your money. I sat down on the edge of my bed and let out a low, humorless laugh. If anyone had seen me right then, they would have thought I'd lost my mind. But it wasn't madness. It was clarity, sharp and bright like cold air on an early morning. There was something they didn't know. Something I'd kept quiet for years. A detail I always stored away like a tiny hidden key in a locked drawer. And tonight, it might finally be useful. I clicked open the purchase details. Every line exposed their fingerprints. Destination: the same city they'd been whispering about all week. Number of passengers: for exactly their group. Booking time: late night when they assumed I'd be fast asleep. Ticket class: business, of course. Why travel modestly when someone else pays? As I studied the information, my phone buzzed again, this time with a low battery warning, nothing dramatic. But the soft vibration jolted me out of my thoughts and brought me back to the room. I plugged the phone in and let it rest on my nightstand, though the screen kept glowing with that transaction, refusing to fade. The house was still. Too still. Usually when something feels wrong, you can sense it in the air before you even know the reason. The silence seemed heavier now, pressing on the edges of the room like a blanket soaked in cold water. I heard a faint rustling downstairs. Probably the stray cat that liked to sneak in through the laundry door. Or maybe the old heater clicking on. Nothing unusual. But tonight, everything felt like a clue. I stood up and pulled my sweater around me. My knees cracked softly. Age has its soundtrack, but I didn't let it slow me. I walked to the window and peeked through the blinds. All calm. All dark. Nothing suspicious. Yet a knot sat in my stomach. Sometimes betrayal doesn't scream. It whispers. Quietly. Softly. And you only hear it if you've been hurt before. I stepped into my slippers and walked out into the hallway. My shadow stretched across the carpet from the dim night light near the stairs. I remembered when my husband installed that light years ago, saying, "You'll appreciate this when we're older." I smiled faintly. He was right. Halfway down the stairs, I paused as another small sound drifted from the kitchen. The rustle of a plastic bag, then the faint click of a cabinet closing. Not loud. Just barely there. If I hadn't lived in this house for 30 years, I might have missed it. I stepped slowly, letting my hand glide along the banister. Each wooden spindle felt familiar beneath my fingers. Comforting, grounding. When I reached the bottom, I could see the glow from the refrigerator door. Someone had just closed it. Someone still awake. Strange. Everyone had gone to bed hours ago. I walked into the kitchen and the faint scent of leftover pasta hit me. Nothing alarming. Yet the room felt disturbed. Not in a dramatic way, but in that subtle way you sense when someone has been where they shouldn't be. A grocery receipt lay near the fruit bowl. I hadn't left it there. Beside it was a travel pamphlet from the airline. I picked it up carefully, reading the bold letters across the top. Upgrade to business class for a superior travel experience. My jaw stiffened. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. I placed the pamphlet back exactly where it had been and glanced at the hallway leading to the guest rooms. A soft light shined from under the door of the room where Mom slept when she visited. It wasn't bright enough to disturb anyone, just enough to show someone awake. I considered confronting her right then, but something inside me said, not yet. Let her think she's safe. Let her think I'm unaware. Let her sleep comfortably for now. I walked back upstairs, my mind sharper than it had been in years. When I reached my bedroom, I closed the door gently behind me and sat at the edge of the bed. My phone was still glowing, still accusing, still telling the truth no one else wanted to admit. I leaned forward and rubbed my temples. A dull ache was forming behind my eyes, not from the situation itself but from years of letting things slide. Years of small, quiet sacrifices. Years of being the responsible one. My fingers drifted toward the drawer of my bedside table, the one that held documents no one else knew I still had. A hint of a smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. Not joy. Not satisfaction. Just a quiet acknowledgement of something long forgotten. A hidden advantage. But I didn't open the drawer. Not yet. Instead, I set my glasses aside, stood up and walked toward the door. My reflection in the hallway mirror caught my attention. Hair messy, sweater uneven, eyes tired. Yet something else stared back at me too. A steadiness I hadn't seen in myself for a very long time. I walked downstairs again before dawn, this time fully awake, alert. The sky outside had shifted from black to a deep blue, that brief, magical moment before sunrise when everything looks clearer. Mom was in the kitchen standing over the coffee maker. When she heard my footsteps, she didn't turn. I placed my phone on the counter in front of her, the bright screen facing up, the charge displayed clearly. "Mom," I said softly. She froze, just for a fraction of a second before turning to face me. And the story cuts right there. Mom's eyes flicked from my face to the phone, then back to me as if hoping the numbers on the screen would magically rearrange themselves into something less incriminating. For a moment she didn't say anything. Not a word. She simply blinked twice in that overly calm way she used whenever she got caught in something uncomfortable. Finally, she let out a soft, dismissive laugh, the kind she used on cashiers when she pretended she didn't understand a price. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, lightly touching the countertop with her fingertips. "I'm sure it's just some mistake. Banks do these things all the time. They charge the wrong people." Her voice sounded too smooth, too prepared. I studied her face. A woman learns to read small things by 65. The twitch of a lip, the wideness of the eyes, the forced calm in a voice trying not to crack. Mom was performing. And badly. Before I could respond, the smell of scrambled eggs drifted from the stove where my daughter, Emily, stood half awake, stirring the pan. She glanced over her shoulder with raised eyebrows. "What's going on?" she asked, but her tone already carried the weight of annoyance. My problems always felt like inconveniences to her. I didn't answer. I simply nudged the phone farther across the counter, letting the bright number gleam in the early morning light. $11,940. Impossible to ignore. Mom leaned closer, squinting. It says, what does it say, airline?" She dragged the word out like it was the first time she'd ever heard of flying. "Maybe they, I don't know, put the wrong card on file." "The wrong card that was saved in my wallet?" I asked quietly. She froze again. Another crack in her performance. Emily placed 2 plates on the table and wiped her hands on a towel. "So, what is it?" she said, already impatient. "Who bought something?" I looked at Mom. She looked at the floor. Before I could speak, Dad shuffled into the kitchen, yawning, rubbing the back of his neck. "Why's everyone up so early?" he muttered as he sank into his usual chair. Then, noticing the atmosphere, he perked up slightly. What happened? Emily gestured with her chin toward the phone and Dad leaned forward, squinting. He read the number slowly then sat back. Oh, he said. Just that one word. But the way he said it. Not surprised. Not confused. Just caught. My chest tightened. I could still feel the faint ache in my knees from standing too long, but I didn't sit. I waited. The silence stretched thin between us. Finally, Mom cleared her throat, straightened her shoulders and said in her most practiced tone, "There must have been some mix-up last night. We were looking online at tickets, yes, but we didn't buy anything." That was lie number one. I could hear it in her voice, not defensive, not frantic, just rehearsed. "We checked a few options, that's all," Dad added quickly, shrugging as though it were harmless. His eyes darted to Mom for approval before settling on his coffee mug. Lie number two. "And besides," Mom continued, "I don't even know how to use your card online. You know that. I barely know how to use my own phone." Lie number three. "Funny how people pretend to be technologically helpless right after making a very technologically advanced purchase." Emily slid into the seat beside her grandfather and sighed heavily. "If it's fraud, just call the bank. Happens all the time. My friend had like 14 charges from a gaming site once." I breathed in slowly. My chest felt tight, but not from stress, from the effort of keeping my voice steady. "I already checked the booking details," I said. "It wasn't fraud." Mom lifted her eyebrows too quickly. "How can you be so sure?" "Because the passenger count is 4, I said. "Same number as all of you." A very small moment occurred then, so quick anyone else might have missed it. Dad's left foot tapped the floor once before he caught himself. Mom's hand tightened around the handle of her mug. Emily's lips pressed into a thin line, not guilty but irritated, annoyed at being roped into something that threatened her plans. Everyone had a tell. I set the phone aside but didn't break eye contact with Mom. "Did you buy business class tickets using my card?" The room stilled. Dad scratched his eyebrow. "Business class? No, we were just looking around. It must have clicked accidentally." Accidentally. 4 tickets. Filled out passenger info. Uploaded passports. Midnight purchase. All an accident. I almost admired the boldness. Before I could reply, the toaster popped loudly, making Emily jump. She used the distraction to avoid the conversation, plating the toast and shoving it toward the middle of the table with a little too much force. Mom took a long, slow sip of coffee. "Honey, if we were buying tickets, wouldn't we tell you? You think we'd do something behind your back?" Lie number 4. A tiny muscle in my jaw tightened. "Yes," I said softly. "I think you would." Mom's expression flickered just for a second before she plastered on a hurt look. "Well, that's unfair." Another performance. Emily grabbed her fork and started eating, glancing between us like she was watching a TV show she'd already seen too many times. I walked around the counter and sat down across from Dad. The chair felt colder than usual. Or maybe I just felt more awake than I wanted to be. The sunlight finally pushed through the small kitchen window, illuminating the clutter. Bills, travel brochures, receipts. A particularly bright orange brochure caught my attention, the corner peeking out from under Mom's planner. I pulled it out gently. It was an airline upgrade offer. Business class cabins. Priority lounge access. Printed the day before. Mom blinked rapidly. "Oh, that's nothing. Your brother must have left it here." My brother didn't live within 3 states. Lie number 5. I placed the brochure back where it had been, not bothering to hide my disbelief. Dad cleared his throat. "Look, money mistakes happen. Maybe you saved your card somewhere on the computer and it auto-filled." Another lie. But this time something small slipped, barely there but noticeable. He said computer. Yet earlier Mom claimed they only looked on the phone. 2 stories. Same event. 0 coordination. The lies were stacking like old dishes leaning too far left. Emily set her fork down and sighed. "Okay, so what now? Are you refunding it? Disputing it? What?" Her tone grated on me, the expectation that I would fix everything once again. I rubbed my hands together under the table to hide their trembling. "I will handle it," I said calmly. "You?" Mom asked sharply. "Why you?" Her reaction was too fast. Too defensive. I tilted my head slightly. "Because it's my card. And because I'm the one paying the bill." Mom's lips parted like she wanted to argue but couldn't find the right angle. Dad stood up abruptly. Let's not make a big deal out of this. We've all been stressed lately. People click things. Let's have breakfast. Before I could reply, he began gathering plates as if a clean kitchen could erase a $12,000 theft. Mom reached for the butter knife and accidentally knocked over the salt shaker. It rolled to the edge of the table and fell to the floor, rattling loudly. A small moment. But it told me everything. She was nervous. Not guilty in a panicked way. Guilty in a caught way. I stood slowly. My legs felt stiff from tension I hadn't noticed building. I walked to the pantry, grabbed a rag and bent down to pick up the salt. The floor was cool beneath my hand. Grounded me. When I stood back up, Mom was watching me, not angrily, not tearfully, but cautiously. The way people stare at someone who suddenly isn't predictable anymore. Emily finally broke the silence. Grandma, did you really buy the tickets or not? Mom gasped like she was offended. Of course not. Dad added, why would we do that? Their voices sounded too synchronized. Too defensive. Too rehearsed. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not pain, not fear. Something firmer. Something that said enough. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse them again. Instead, I pulled out a chair and sat down slowly, placing both hands on the table. Here's what I need, I said gently, meeting each of their eyes one by one. I need the truth. Not excuses. Not mistakes. Not stories. The truth. Mom bit her lip. Dad looked away. Emily leaned back in her chair. Nobody spoke. Not one word. Just the sound of the refrigerator humming again, filling the silence like a quiet reminder of the house listening. I eventually lifted my phone, pressed my thumb to it and said one final sentence. Quiet, controlled, but enough to send a chill through the room. I already contacted the bank. Mom's eyes widened. Dad's hand froze mid-wipe with a dish towel. Emily's fork clattered on her plate. Their reactions were finally honest. And I let the moment hang. I didn't explain anything else. I didn't reveal what the bank said. I didn't reveal what would happen next. Instead, I stood up, smoothed my sweater and walked toward the hallway. Because sometimes silence is more frightening than confrontation. And I wanted them to sit with the fear for a moment. Just one moment. Before the real consequences began. The moment I left the kitchen, the weight of their silence followed me down the hallway like a shadow pressed against my back. I didn't look over my shoulder. I didn't need to. I could feel the tension filling that small room the way steam fills a kettle. Slowly, steadily, with a quiet hiss you can only hear if you're paying attention. I walked into my bedroom and closed the door gently, letting the latch catch without a sound. My hands were warm from gripping the phone too tightly, but the rest of me felt cold, as if my body was finally catching up to the reality of what had unfolded. I sat on the edge of my bed again, but this time I didn't stare at the transaction. I already knew what it said. I had spent the morning listening to their lies, watching their faces shift between innocence and irritation, and I was done waiting for them to admit anything. My thumb hovered over the banking app for just a breath before I tapped it open. There it was. My earlier call logged as a pending report. A small red icon blinking like a heartbeat. I clicked it. A message appeared. A representative will contact you for follow-up within 15 minutes. 15 minutes. More than enough time for my thoughts to catch up. I leaned back against the headboard, letting my shoulders sink into the pillows. My chest rose and fell in slow, heavy breaths. It's funny, at my age people assume the worst thing you can feel is fear about your health, your mobility, your future. But betrayal has a way of making you feel something deeper than fear. It makes you feel foolish. And foolish is a harder feeling to swallow. The faint sound of the front door opening and closing drifted from downstairs. Footsteps. Whispers. Movement. They were all talking about me, that much I knew. I closed my eyes and let the distant voices blend into a dull noise. I didn't want to hear excuses or scrambling or whatever story Mom would try next. My phone rang. The sound startled me a little. It was louder in the quiet room. I straightened my sweater and answered. Hello, this is Angela from the fraud department. Is this Mrs. Parker? Yes, I said, my voice steady. Thank you for your earlier report. We just need to verify a few details about the airline purchase on your account. I'm ready, I replied. Her tone shifted into a more serious professionalism. Can you confirm whether you made this purchase yourself? No, I said firmly. I was asleep at the time. Understood. A few clicks on her keyboard. And do you recognize any of the passenger names connected to the booking? The question washed over me like cold rain. Names. Passenger names. I hadn't even seen that section yet. I haven't looked, I admitted. But I can. Take your time, she said kindly. I opened the booking details again, scrolling slowly until the page expanded. There they were, 4 names listed neatly as if typed with full confidence. My mother. My daughter. My son-in-law. And my grandson. My breath caught. Seeing their names, seeing them written so boldly on a ticket charged to my card, felt different than just knowing it. It felt like the final puzzle piece dropping into place. Yes, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I recognize all of them. Angela exhaled on the other end. I see. That's helpful. In that case, we'll initiate a formal unauthorized purchase investigation. It may require a temporary freeze on your card and a verification process with the airline. Do whatever needs to be done, I whispered. Then something else slipped through, something she didn't say explicitly but implied through her tone. This wasn't just a standard fraud report. This was a case involving known individuals using someone else's card without consent. A more serious category. A different kind of alarm bell. I swallowed hard. Angela continued, Mrs. Parker, you'll also receive an email shortly requesting documentation. If anyone in your household has access to your devices or physical cards, please secure them. Household. The word stung a little. Yes, I said. I'll handle it. She thanked me for my cooperation and ended the call, but I kept the phone pressed to my ear for a moment, listening to the quiet tone of the disconnected line. Then I lowered my hand slowly. My heart wasn't racing, but it wasn't calm either. It felt like it was walking a tightrope between anger and exhaustion. I stood up and walked to my closet, opening the small, creaky door. On the top shelf sat a shoebox, one I hadn't touched in years. Inside it were old checkbooks, copies of signatures, and a folder thick with paperwork from the days when Mom relied on me to help her with bills after Dad's surgery. Useful paperwork. Paperwork she thought I'd thrown away. I placed the shoebox on the bed and sifted through it, my fingers brushing over old accounts we had once shared, authorization forms I'd signed out of trust and responsibility, and pages of financial history I hadn't thought about in years. Then I found something I didn't expect. A printed email from Dad years ago, thanking me for updating one of their travel profiles with my card because they couldn't figure out the system. That explained the seamless midnight purchase. They hadn't needed my physical card. They had saved information I had once given them for emergencies, and used it for convenience. A slow ache settled in my chest. I heard the wooden floor creak outside my bedroom door, a hesitant step. Then another. I didn't turn. I kept sorting the papers, pretending not to notice. A soft knock followed. Too soft to be Dad. Too hesitant to be Emily. Mom. It was my grandson Noah. I inhaled. Come in. He slipped through the door with the kind of nervousness only children who've witnessed adult tension understand. His hair was tousled, his shoulders tense. I heard what happened, he whispered as if the whole house were eavesdropping. I softened my expression. It's not your fault, sweetheart. He nodded, but his eyes told me he didn't fully believe it. A moment passed, quiet, heavy. Then he said, Grandma, they've been planning the trip for weeks. I heard them talking last night before bed. They said, you wouldn't find out until after. A chill crept up my spine. Not after the purchase. After the trip. So they weren't planning to tell me at all, I murmured. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. I placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Thank you for telling me. He nodded again, then backed out of the room slowly, closing the door behind him with the same carefulness I'd used earlier. As soon as he left, I sat heavily on the bed. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from a kind of realization that cuts deeper than anger. They weren't just hiding a mistake. They were hiding intentions. I opened the email from Angela that had just arrived. It outlined the next steps. Card freeze. Signature verification. Passenger confirmation. Airline fraud flag. Investigation timeline. At the bottom a line stood out. If the booking was made by individuals known to you, additional review may be required. Additional review. I knew what that meant. More scrutiny for them. More inconvenience. More consequences. I stood, straightened the papers on the bed and placed everything neatly back into the shoebox. Then I slid it under the bed, out of sight but within reach. Downstairs, the voices had grown louder, the tension thicker. I couldn't make out the words, but I could tell the conversation wasn't going well. Hard tones. Sharp sentences. Nervous shuffling. Good. Let them worry for a while. I opened my bedroom window to let in the crisp morning air. The breeze carried a faint smell of dew and fresh soil, grounding, calming. I let it wash over me for a few seconds before closing the window gently. My phone vibrated again. A new notification from the airline. Booking flagged. Passenger verification required. Please present identification at the airport. A slow, steady breath escaped my lips. The tables were already turning, and none of them knew just how much. Not yet. But by the time we reached the airport, the shift in the air was unmistakable, like the quiet pressure before a storm that hasn't announced itself but is already gathering in the clouds. I rode in the back seat while they talked in hushed, tense tones up front. Mom kept checking her purse, flipping through papers with shaking hands. Dad's knuckles were tight around the steering wheel. Emily scrolled on her phone, jaw clenched, not looking at anyone. Even my grandson, usually bubbly and curious, stared out the window silently. No one spoke to me. They weren't ready for what the morning held. But I was. As soon as we walked through the sliding doors of the terminal, the cool rush of air conditioning brushed across my face, carrying with it the faint smell of coffee, disinfectant, and early morning travelers. My shoes tapped quietly against the polished floor as I followed behind them at a distance. Not close enough to be included, not far enough to look separate. Mom led the group, chin lifted just a touch too high, as if confidence alone could hold everything together. She clutched her boarding folder so tightly the papers bent around her fingers. Dad walked beside her, pretending to be calm but glancing at every sign as if waiting for some kind of cosmic reassurance. I didn't rush. At 65 you learn the value of pacing, letting others reveal themselves while you watch from steady ground. The check-in counter stood ahead, bright screens blinking with flight numbers. The line wasn't long, but the energy around it felt restless. Families whispering, couples arguing softly, suitcase wheels dragging across tile. Mom straightened her sweater and stepped forward, handing over her passport first. The agent, a young woman with neat hair and tired eyes, scanned it then smiled politely. Good morning. Traveling to Denver today? Mom nodded with a tight smile. Yes. 4 of us. The agent scanned the next passport. Then the next. Then Dad's. Each time her expression remained neutral. Then she began typing, soft clicks echoing faintly beneath the airport noise. Her typing slowed. Just a fraction. But I noticed. She glanced at the screen again. Then typed something else. Then frowned. Mom noticed too. Her posture stiffened. Is there a problem? The agent's polite expression faltered. One moment, please. She tapped a few more keys, her brows narrowing ever so slightly. Dad leaned over the counter. Is it a seat issue? We paid for business class. Mom shot him a sharp look. He went silent. The agent swallowed, clicked one more button, then pressed her lips together. I'm sorry, she said calmly. There's a hold on these tickets. I'll need to get a supervisor. Mom blinked rapidly. A hold? What does that mean? We paid. Her voice wavered before she could disguise it. The agent offered a practiced, apologetic smile. It happens sometimes, ma'am. A supervisor will explain everything. She picked up the phone. Soft tones carried through the air, nothing anyone else in the terminal cared about. But to us it sounded like a summons. Mom turned sharply toward Dad. Did you enter everything correctly last night? Dad bristled. Of course I did. Quiet, she snapped under her breath. Emily set her suitcase down, arms crossed tightly. What does a hold even mean? I didn't answer. But I knew. They didn't. Yet. A tall man in a navy jacket approached. The supervisor. He walked with the slow, steady pace of someone trained not to show urgency even when carrying it internally. He tapped the screen lightly, examined the booking, then lifted his eyes to our group. Who purchased these tickets? He asked. Mom raised her chin. We did. He paused, a subtle pause no more than a heartbeat before saying, using the card on file? She hesitated. Yes. I watched the shift happen in his posture, respectful but firm. I'm afraid we need to verify authorization from the card holder. The booking was flagged overnight. Dad's brows furrowed. Flagged? Why? The supervisor offered a measured answer. The system detected a discrepancy. We'll need to speak with the cardholder before we can clear the reservation. Mom turned slowly, painfully slowly, toward me. Her lips parted but no sound came out. I walked forward quietly, placing one foot in front of the other, feeling the cool tile beneath my soles and the stretch in my knees with every step. I'm the cardholder, I said softly. The supervisor nodded politely. Thank you, ma'am. I'll need to ask. But Mom cut in sharply. This is unnecessary. Just fix the tickets. We have a flight to catch. The supervisor's expression didn't change. Ma'am, I understand this is stressful, but we must ensure the purchase was authorized. He looked at me again. Did you approve this transaction? I met his gaze. Steady. Calm. Certain. No, I said. Mom sputtered. She doesn't know. She's confused. I wasn't confused, I said quietly, my eyes never leaving the supervisor's. I reported it. Mom froze. Dad's shoulders slumped. Emily's face drained of color. The supervisor clicked his tablet and nodded. Understood. In that case, the tickets must remain on hold until the investigation is complete. I'm also required to notify the airline's fraud unit. Mom stepped closer, lowering her voice to a harsh whisper. Why would you do that? We're family. The supervisor overheard. Ma'am, please lower your voice. But she couldn't. She was unraveling. Slowly. Quietly. Exactly the way denial dissolves when truth stands too close. Dad tried stepping in. Can't we just pay again? Use another card. The supervisor shook his head. The booking is frozen. No changes, cancellations, or repurchases can be made until the investigation clears the hold. Emily ran a hand through her hair. How long does that take? It varies, he replied. A vague truth. A necessary one. Other travelers waiting in line began to notice. A few tried not to stare. Some failed. Even subtle glances felt loud in a moment like this. Mom's panic wasn't a scream, not a meltdown, just a quiet cracking beneath her words. We planned this trip for weeks. You can't ruin it like this. I inhaled slowly, feeling my lungs stretch against the tightness in my chest. I didn't ruin anything, I said. You did. The supervisor cleared his throat. Ma'am, may I speak with you privately? Mom bristled. Why? Talk to us here. He lowered his voice. Because if the purchase was unauthorized, we may need to ask additional questions about who accessed the stored card information. The meaning hung in the air. Accusation without accusation. Consequence without handcuffs. Truth without volume. Mom's shoulders dropped. Dad looked at the floor. Emily paced in a small, frantic circle. My grandson stood absolutely still. I followed the supervisor a few steps away while they waited behind, tense and silent. He explained the process. The airline would send a verification email, the bank would issue a freeze. Security might ask for identification from each of them if the flag escalated. All reasonable. All procedural. All devastating for a person who expected a seamless, luxurious departure. When we returned to the counter, Mom's voice was tiny. So, we're not flying? The supervisor didn't soften his tone. Not today, ma'am. Dad let out a quiet, defeated breath. Emily sank onto her suitcase. My grandson looked between all of them, then at me. Not with blame, not with confusion, but with an understanding a child shouldn't have to carry. Mom leaned heavily on the counter, whispering, "We can fix this, right?" No one answered her. Not even the supervisor. Instead, he nodded politely at me, then turned away to assist another traveler, someone whose morning wasn't shattering at their feet. We stood there as people moved around us, rolling past with luggage, chatting about vacations, sipping coffee as if the world hadn't tilted for us in the last 20 minutes. I adjusted my purse strap, took a small step back and said calmly, "I should head to my gate." They all stared at me. "You're still going?" Emily asked. "Yes," I replied. "I have a valid ticket." Mom's face crumpled in disbelief. "You'd leave us here?" I felt the weight of her question, but I didn't let it bend me. "I'm leaving the consequences where they belong," I said softly. And with that I turned toward the escalators. I didn't rush. I didn't look back. I let the airport swallow me whole, one quiet step at a time, while behind me the ruin they created settled around them like a slow-falling snowfall. And none of them could stop it now. As I stepped onto the escalator, the hum of the moving stairs blended with the distant chatter of travelers. Families laughing, couples arguing, children tugging on sleeves. Life was happening everywhere, loud and indifferent, and for once I didn't feel responsible for anyone inside it. My hands rested lightly on the rail as I rose toward the upper level, leaving every lie, every excuse, and every ounce of guilt behind me. At the top I paused. Not because I doubted myself, not anymore, but because I wanted to feel this shift fully. The open windows let in a wash of bright morning light, glinting across the polished floor and warming my face. For the first time in years I felt light, unanchored, free. I checked my gate number again and followed the signs. No rush. No anxiety pressing against my ribs. Just steady, deliberate steps. The kind of walk a woman takes when she knows she's stepping into a new version of her life. When I reached the gate I sat down near the window watching the plane outside. The workers moved with purpose. Loading suitcases, checking equipment, speaking into radios. The rhythm of airport life felt strangely comforting, like a world where every role had rules and consequences, unlike the twisted moral universe my family had tried to drag me into. My phone buzzed. I didn't look immediately. Let it ring. Let the world keep spinning while they scrambled. When it buzzed a second time I opened the screen. 10 missed calls from Mom. 6 from Emily. 3 from Dad. And a long, frantic text from Mom. They said the whole booking is under investigation. They won't let us rebook. Fix this. Now. I stared at the message for a long moment, letting the weight of her entitlement settle where it belonged, not on my conscience but on my past mistakes. Mistakes I was now correcting. Another message came in. We didn't mean for this to happen. Just please come back to the counter. It wasn't remorse. It was desperation. And it wasn't my job anymore to soothe their desperation. I locked my phone and slid it into my purse. The overhead speaker crackled. Boarding will begin shortly. A soft, relieved breath escaped me. Not dramatic. It's true. As the rows were called I stood and moved into line. The agent scanned my boarding pass with a friendly smile. Have a wonderful trip, she said. I nodded. I planned to. Walking onto the plane, the familiar scent of recycled air mixed with the faint citrus of the cleaning wipes. I found my seat, a simple window seat, nothing luxurious, but it felt like the most peaceful place in the world. When I sat down I rested my palm against the cool window. The tarmac stretched out beneath the morning sun, glistening slightly. The plane's engines hummed softly, like a giant animal preparing to wake. My phone vibrated again. Another message, this time from Dad. Your card freeze triggered the old accounts. We can't access any of the funds. What did you do? There was the twist none of them saw coming. Years ago, after Dad's surgery, I had been added as a secondary guardian on one of their accounts. They never bothered to remove me later. And because their airline purchase was flagged under the same family financial profile, the bank automatically paused every linked account pending review. Not permanently. Not dangerously. Just enough to stop their trip. Enough to stop the cycle. I typed a simple reply, not cruel, not smug, just truthful. I secured my finances. You'll have access again when the investigation clears. No insults. No explanations. Just a boundary they'd never expected me to draw. The reply came instantly. We need money for the hotel. We're stuck here. I read it once. Then a second time. And then I put my phone on airplane mode. The click of the switch felt like a door closing gently, polite, final, and necessary. As the plane began taxiing, I closed my eyes, letting the movement rock me. My breathing matched the rhythm of the engine. For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't the one fixing anything. I wasn't the emergency contact. I wasn't the bank. I wasn't the backup plan. I wasn't the easy target. I was just me. A woman allowed to be tired. Allowed to be quiet. Allowed to take up space without apology. The plane lifted into the sky, and the world beneath me shrank into a soft patchwork of green and gray. I watched the landscape fade into clouds, thick, white, peaceful. Somewhere below those clouds my family was pacing, arguing, panicking, blaming each other. But none of that chaos could reach me up here. Mid-flight, I ordered a simple cup of tea. The warmth seeped into my hands, soothing the tension in my fingers. I held the cup near my chest and let the steam brush against my face. It had been years since tea felt this comforting. As I sipped it, a memory floated up, gentle, uninvited. My husband used to tell me, "Someday you'll realize you give too much to people who give too little." He never said it cruelly, only as a quiet truth he hoped I'd understand before it hurt me. I didn't learn it then, but I was learning it now. When we landed, I stepped out into the crisp air of a new city. The breeze lifted the ends of my hair, bringing with it a faint smell of pine and something sweet I couldn't name. The airport here felt smaller, quieter, a place not filled with frantic texts or strained voices. I collected my luggage with ease. No rush. No eyes watching me with expectation. I walked outside, hailed a taxi, and gave the address of my hotel. A modest place I'd booked weeks ago after deciding I needed a break from home, even before the credit card incident. When I arrived, the lobby smelled faintly of lavender and polished wood. A soft piano melody played somewhere out of sight. I checked in, received my room key, and rode the small elevator up to the third floor. The room was simple, clean, peaceful. A single bed with white linens. A small window overlooking trees. A soft chair in the corner. A quiet hum of distant traffic. I placed my suitcase beside the wall and sat on the bed. The mattress dipped gently beneath my weight, welcoming me. For the first time in years, I felt no eyes on me. No expectations. No guilt pressing into the corners of my ribs. Just freedom. I changed into comfortable clothes and walked to the window. The trees swayed lightly, their leaves shimmering in the sunlight. The view wasn't grand, but it was mine. As I stood there, my phone, still on airplane mode, sat silent on the nightstand. I picked it up, turned airplane mode off, and watched as dozens of messages poured in like a flood. "Where are you? We're stranded. We can't book anything. This is your fault. Why are you doing this? We can't access anything. Say something." I scrolled through them slowly, feeling neither anger nor pity. Just understanding. Their crisis wasn't my crisis anymore. I selected Mom's message thread. Typed one final reply. "If you can't afford your own choices, don't make them." The same words she once used to belittle me, returned to her with quiet truth. No exclamation point. No explanation. Just closure. I set the phone down gently. Then I walked outside. The fresh air kissed my face. The ground felt steady under my feet. And the world felt bigger than it had in decades. For once, I wasn't walking behind anyone. Or cleaning up anyone's mess. Or being treated like a silent wallet. I was walking forward. Alone. Strong. Free. And that, more than any revenge I could have planned, was the ending I didn't know I needed. If this story touched you or reminded you of a time you finally stood up for yourself, don't leave just yet. Subscribe, stay with this community, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today?